This conference will now be recorded.
All right, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's Race Day Ready webinar with Coach Seth. That is me, that is I, and I'm excited to have you all either on the live call or I'm excited to have those who are going to be checking this out between now and Race Day. I had mentioned previously before we started recording that this webinar is going to be specifically catered to not only the marathon distance, but to the Chicago Marathon. So I realize that many of you are training for the Chicago Marathon, but some of you aren't, and are maybe doing an October marathon or an early November marathon and are checking this out as well. So that's cool. I think you'll find something or some things useful out of tonight's presentation. So I encourage everyone to type in their comments, questions, concerns. We are going to set aside an hour for tonight's call. I will certainly get done presenting the information before that hour, but we're going to leave time for some Q&A. So it's a pleasure to have everyone here with me now and in the future on the recording. So a few things that we're going to be covering, or really all the things that we're going to be covering tonight, is we're going to talk about race week. We're going to talk about race weekend, race morning, the race itself, talk a little racing strategy, post-race, reminders for your supporters. We'll throw in a little inspiration there, and then just some ways to stay connected as we come to the end of our coach-athlete relationship here in the next week or so. So I like throwing this slide in at the beginning because I think it's really important. Many of you are running for charity, some of you aren't. That's all cool, that's all fine and well, but without a doubt, each and every one of you have a reason or reasons why you signed up for the Chicago Marathon or whichever race that you signed up for, and it's important to remember that why. Have you lost touch of that throughout training? If you have, well, don't beat yourself up over it. That's normal too. But now, as we stare at race day about a week out, it's important to reconnect to that why and remember why you registered. Some of you registered as far back as a week or two after the 2018 Chicago Marathon. Maybe it was out of excitement, maybe it was out of a challenge that was posed, or maybe you volunteered at the race last year and were inspired. That's certainly how I got my start in running the Chicago Marathon. So whatever it was and whatever compelled and inspired you to sign up and then inspired you to run for charity or run for yourself or run for something greater than yourselves, now is the time to reconnect with that as we head into race week. So speaking of race week, we're going to just dive into some best practices. Again, if there's anything that doesn't register with you, or you have a question or something that doesn't make sense, I encourage you to go ahead and ask. So we want to keep things super simple. We've all heard of the KISS acronym, keep it super simple. That certainly applies to between now and race day. So what does that mean? A few things. It means eat the same foods. Next week is not the time to try some exotic fare that sounds great, and it's better to be boring. Let's just put it that way. So whatever's been working for you in training, let's stick with that. We want to try to continue to work out and run at the same time. So if you've been an early morning person, stick with that. If you've been running late morning, early afternoon, stick with that. Just try to keep things as normal as possible. It's important to get plenty of sleep, especially during the weekday or during the week next week, because you might find Saturday night to be challenging. As I certainly do, whether it be anxiety, nerves, all the above. Saturday night, for whatever reason, tends to be a little challenging to get sleep. Your race day shoes, you should have those already, and if you don't freak out, but I would get those sooner rather than later. Ideally, you'd want to have anywhere between 25 to 75 miles on those race day shoes, so those would be gently worn. Uh, I would recommend not running in the shoes that you've been training in all summer. Although that's okay too. I mean, I've certainly done races before where had several hundred miles on the shoes and they did well in the race. So I think that having a new or fresh pair of race day shoes, for me at least, it's as much mental as it is physical as far as a boost. So consider getting your race day shoes now if you don't have those already. Again, going back to not trying anything new, but now is not the time to try a new gel or electrolyte drink. We should really have our race day nutrition and hydration um, options selected and picked out. So again, nothing new with that. And then stick to your training plan. So let's just say this weekend something comes up because life gets in the way and we're all human beings with lives outside of running, and you miss a workout. No big deal. Go ahead and move on to the next day and tackle that day's workout that's prescribed for you. So stick to your training plan. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to add on extra miles for anything that you feel like you've missed, because as they say, the hay is in the barn. There's nothing that you can do to at this point really further enhance your race day fitness. There is a lot that you can do to sabotage your efforts. Race week continued. Some other best practices. Do you have small children? Are your race weekend childcare plans solidified? If not, now's the time to get that taken care of. I recommend being packed by next Thursday. This will give you plenty of time to call an audible or figure out what's missing, what do you need, what last minute purchases you need to make. But also you want to dress for race day as if the air temperatures is going to be 10 to 15 degrees warmer than what it's actually stated. Why is that? Well, that's because as you get running, your core body temperature will rise, and so we need to account for that. So dressing in layers is probably something that we want to consider. Again, we don't really, at this point, I wouldn't feel comfortable banking on like what the 10-day forecast says. Obviously, we want to kind of wait as we get into the week next week to have a better idea, a firmer grasp on what the race day temperature is going to be. If you're running with your own nutrition and hydration, now's the time to make sure that you have all those items purchased and with you. Again, it's worth jumping on the Chicago Marathon website or the race website and seeing what is permitted. If you've been training with a hydration belt or a handheld and you plan on running with that, that's cool, that's allowed. Just be warned that security does reserve the right to dump the contents of any sort of bottle that you bring into or through the security line. Don't really see that happen that often, but I've gotten this, or I've had this question posed to me numerous times throughout the summer, and so I'll just say it here. Backpacks like Camelbacks, hydration backpacks are not allowed. So those won't be allowed in the race. So if you were planning on running with a hydration backpack, you'll need to scrap those plans. Whether you're driving or flying, obviously making sure that your travel details are taken care of and are confirmed. Again, maybe double checking with your hotel just to make sure that they have everything in place for your reservation. You can never be too careful with those types of things. As you can imagine, there are horror stories out there. So you want to make sure that your hotel is squared away. Double check with them. And again, race hydration starts really no later than Thursday of next week. It would probably not be a very good idea to, let's just say if you're running for charity, just in this example, and on Saturday night, you're sitting at your charity team dinner and you think to yourself, oh, wow, I better really start hydrating for the race tomorrow. So really that starts in earnest on Thursday of next week. So prepare for that accordingly, and you should be good to go. But certainly Saturday is not the time to to start thinking about that. Moving into race weekend is really where the fun begins, right? Obviously, your arrival into Chicago, knowing how and when you're going to be arriving. Hopefully, those plans are already and have been taken care of for quite some time now. For food, having a plan for where and when you will eat, sticking with that theme of nothing new on race or close to race day. So many of you out there have food allergy concerns, myself included, and having a plan in place of where you're going to eat. If you're gonna go, do a mini grocery shopping trip, getting that taken care of and getting the food to your hotel. Having all that figured out and having a plan in place is something that would be advisable to tackle this weekend. For those of you, again, because we do have a lot of charity athletes listening to this, don't rely solely on the food that's being provided at the team event. If you have a dairy allergy, for example, dairy gets thrown in a lot of different foods. Packing your own food and just really eliminating any sort of variables is really, really important. So you want to get stuck in Chicago and not having a plan in place and being forced to eat foods that don't necessarily agree with you. We'll touch on a little bit later on spectator viewing, but many of you, or all of you probably, who are signed up for the Chicago Marathon are getting emails from the event. And there was one that just came out earlier this week on downloading the Chicago Marathon app. We're going to touch base on that a little bit more in detail, but having a plan in place for those who are going to be watching you, if they're going to be in Chicago along the course, is figure that plan out now is really important. For the race expo and packet pickup, that's going to be taking place this upcoming, or excuse me, starting a week from tomorrow on October 11th from 9 to 8 p.m. and then October 12th on Saturday from 9 to 6. This changed about 5 or 6 years ago. You used to be able to pick up other people's packets, bibs, race shirts. That is no longer the case and hasn't been the case, like I said, for about 5 or 6 years. So you have to have a plan in place to be able to get to the expo, to get to McCormick Place, to get your stuff. And so, again, knowing how you're going to get from your hotel to McCormick Place is pretty important. There is public transportation options available. If you are going to drive to McCormick Place, there's a very large parking garage, so parking's not a concern. However, one tip that I would suggest is don't forget to get your parking ticket validated before leaving McCormick Place, because otherwise you'll be paying in excess of probably $22, $23, and that validation will get you a $10 parking stay, which is obviously much better. There's going to be a lot of vendors sampling at the expo. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of energy. I encourage you to soak that up, but I also encourage you to not really try anything new. Again, sticking with that theme. Now is not the time to buy your race day shoes at the expo. I encourage you to take samples, but try those out after the race. Know the course. It's probably not realistic on race weekend, or really at any time, let's be honest, to drive the course in Chicago. But you can find the course video, I believe, on the Chicago Marathon website, if not on YouTube. I would jump on there just to familiarize yourself with what's in front of you. And I also find that pretty inspiring too, to check that out and see where you're going to be running, because it really is the best way to see the city. Race morning, time to change your life. Having multiple means of waking up is really, really important, i.e. setting more than one alarm, having loved ones call you if you will be staying with a loved one, like, for example, in a hotel room, having them set their alarms, setting the actual alarm clock that's in your hotel room, having the front desk giving you a courtesy wake-up call, all the above. you get the drift. Worst case scenario, you don't even want to consider that. So again, knowing how you're going to get to where you're staying in the city to the start area. For those of you who are going to be traveling via car, for example, if you live in the suburbs and you just plan on driving in, I highly encourage you no later than this weekend to jump on Spot Hero, which is who the Chicago Marathon recommends, to reserve parking. I had done that already about a week ago, and a lot of like the really close spots to Grant Park where the race starts were already filling up. So you're going to want to jump on Spot Hero if you plan on parking race morning. If you plan on taking, for example, like the Metra in, just jumping on their website and just making sure that you're familiar with the train schedules, obviously very, very important. Again, we don't know what race morning temps are going to be, but it's always a good idea to dress in layers and bring some throwaway clothes that you don't mind parting with. Have no worries that those throwaway clothes do get donated to local homeless shelters, but you want to avoid the situation where you're standing in the start corral and you're shivering because you don't have an extra layer or two. So gloves, hats that you don't mind getting rid of, long sleeve tops, sweatshirts, cheap pants that you maybe go and get from Walmart or somewhere like that, I would do. I would say if you get to your start corral, about 60 minutes might be excessive, but certainly 30 to 45 minutes before it closes, or be just around it is ideal. The start corrals typically close 10 to 15 minutes before those respective corral or those respective waves start. So like, for example, if you're in wave 1 and you're starting at 7:30, the corral closes at 7:20. So you just want to be nearby so you can use the restroom, warm up, stretch, do whatever you need to do. But just know that, like, in a moment's notice, you can jump into the corral and not be forced to go. Because I think if you, like, for example, if you're in B and you don't get into your corral time, then corral time, then you have to go like to the very last corral in that first wave. So which is would be a bummer. Once you're in your corral, I really encourage you to take the time to start focusing on the race and visualizing how you are going to execute all 26.2 miles. You'll see a lot of people, a lot of nervous energy and anxiousness. Totally get that, been there, done that. But now is the time to get in there. You will be packed like sardines. It's just, there's 45,000 people. It's kind of crazy, kind of frenetic, but you don't have to be. So I encourage you to close your eyes, do some deep breathing, visualize yourself running through the city, visualize yourself running strongly through the city. Take a time to reflect on how far you've come, because you've come a long way. And so I think this is a really overlooked but very important part of the race. So we had a question. We had our first question. Mark asked, do the corrals have bathrooms, porta potties in them? Mark, they don't have them in them, but the porta potties are just kind of like parallel or adjacent to the corrals. So you'll be able to be in your corral, and if you need to, in a moment's notice, step out of your corral, and there are porta potties right there. I do encourage you, again, that's why I encourage you, though, to get there early, because these lines to these porta potties are very, very long. But I would encourage you to, if you see when you step out of the corral, or you're by your corral and you need to use the restroom, and you see like the line is like, no joke, 30 people deep, don't get deflated, because if you look a little bit further down, maybe like a little bit further up in the corral or further back, there are porta potties everywhere. There's literally thousands and thousands of them, but they're not necessarily in the corrals, but they are right beside or right parallel to the corrals. That's a good question, though. So talking about the race, the gun has sounded and you're off. And it's really important, and it's going to go against your nature. It certainly does for me, to start slowly and take the first few miles to really settle into a strong and realistic pace. You will notice, and And hopefully if you take anything out of this webinar tonight, you'll remember this as you start and you're on a world record pace for you within the first couple of miles, to slow down, because it is very easy to get swept up in the pageantry and just the adrenaline that is the event. But we're not looking to set a PR on the 10K here. We are looking to run a strong and steady race. And so, a lot of people will freak out that if they get behind whatever it is that they set for their goal finishing time, if they're behind that in the first 4 miles. Just remember, you have 22 miles in that example to make up any sort of ground. So be patient. Be patient, because you will get behind people that are slower than you, and it will be hard to pass. It is challenging to pass people within the first couple miles of the marathon because it is so crowded. And so patience really will win the day. And it really does take a good 5 to 7 miles before the course starts to thin out and you feel like you can really kind of breathe. So know that going in. The Chicago Marathon, along with the New York City Marathon, two biggest marathons in the world. So like I just said, it's gonna be crowded. Really, I encourage you to resist the urge to weave in and out of runners. That's just energy spent moving laterally, which is the wrong way. Stay patient. When you see an opening between people, take it. We'll talk a little bit about racing strategy in terms of passing here in a slide or two, but just be patient, right? Now obviously is the time to be executing your nutrition and hydration strategy. Keep in mind, I would also encourage you, before I say this, jump on the Chicago Marathon website, familiarize yourself with the course, yes, but also familiarize yourself with where the water / Gatorade stations are. There are a lot of them, but it's good to have an idea of where they are. But each hydration station, or let's just call them aid stations, are a couple city blocks in length. So you will see this, and I want you to take notice of this, because we're not going to do this. The people that are listening, or the athletes that are listening to this right now and who are going to be listening between now and race day, we are not going to make a beeline for the first water or Gatorade table that we see. We know that there are several tables, and that those volunteers are just as capable of helping us out as the volunteers at the first tables. So resist the urge to make that beeline to those first tables. Be patient, run past those first couple tables, and then take the time to, if you have to, stop. Make sure you grab the water so you don't drop it. You will have volunteers that hold the water / Gatorade in different ways. They'll hold it high, they'll hold it low, they'll cup it, they'll squeeze it. It might be hard to grab it out of their hands, especially in the later miles when your fingers and your extremities aren't necessarily working properly. And so, skipping those first couple tables, I have found to be invaluable. Plus, it becomes a hazard as well. When you have thousands of runners just making a beeline for one table, it's really easy for somebody to run right in front of you and for a collision to happen, for an injury to happen. I've seen it happen more than once at the Chicago Marathon. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding that. We want to smile and stay positive, and know, just going in, just like in your training, there's going to be peaks and valleys in the race. A peak is going to be the start. A peak is going to be when they're playing Springsteen's Born to Run at the start, or U2, and there's just so much positive energy and just so much of a celebratory mood that's in the air, to just get caught up in that, like we talked about. And there's going to be times where you're running through the south side of Chicago and there's hardly anybody along the course, in that part of the course, cheering you on. And so that might be a valley for you. But just knowing that that is normal, and that the valleys aren't going to last for the rest of the race, and the peaks aren't going to last for the rest of the race. So we just need to try to stay as neutral as we possibly can. And then I see we have a couple questions. So as soon as I finish this slide, we'll tackle those. I love mantras. If any of you have read the weekly tips that have gone out over the last 19 weeks, you know that I'm a fan of those. So if you haven't used a mantra, maybe now's the time. And I find that my mantras have changed from one season to the next. But for example, just things simple as like finish strong, or I got this, or 1 mile, or be present, or just do it, or things that sound really simple, but can really give you that extra boost when it's sorely needed. And then last, but certainly not least on this slide, trust in your training and just take things 1 mile at a time. It's really easy to, like, for example, get to mile 16 and start to freak out because you've got 10 more miles left. And, certainly if it's your first marathon, wondering how in the heck am I going to run another 10 miles? I've already ran so far. My feet are killing me, and you can see how it can snowball. But just trust in your training. Most, if not all of you, have ran at this point at least 20 miles. That is a really long way to go, a really long way to run. And not only have you ran 20 miles, but you've been running for, let's just say, 4 months, and you've accumulated weeks and weeks and weeks of miles that you have in your bank, and you're ready to spend on race day. But it's also very, very important to not get ahead of ourselves and to just focus on being present. It's back to that mantra: be present. 1 mile, 1 mile, 1 mile. Be present. So staying focused and being where your feet are at that time is uber important. So let's go. We have a couple questions. So Jessica has something. So Jessica says, I imagine there's no space in the corral to do a warm-up exercises. How do you recommend getting in your warm-ups before getting crammed in the corral? That's a really great question, Jessica, and especially in the corrals as you get to the time where they close. People just, hundreds and hundreds more people just start packing in. So you're right, like you are shoulder to shoulder. So, other than like shaking out your legs and just like fidgeting, there's nothing else that you can do. So that would then go back to what I was talking about, like, getting by your corral a good 45 minutes, even up to an hour ahead of time, to, first things first, get there, find where the porta potties are. If you're anything like me, using the restroom right away, and then, parallel, there will be some space or along the side by your corral, or certainly if you get to the corrals early enough, there won't be anybody in the corral except for a few people here and there. You can do your warm up. So you can certainly do your warm-ups in the corral if you get there early enough. So I would, my order of operations typically are: find my corral where it's at, use the restroom, go through my warm-up routine, and because I'm anxious, use the restroom again. Maybe do another 5 minutes of just like warming up, or just walking back and forth. If needed, use the restroom one more time, and then getting into the corral at about about 5 minutes before when the cutoff is, and then just kind of staying put and just trusting in that, like, you got to warm up in, you've used the restroom, you will certainly start warming up as you get running. So hopefully that helps somewhat. But you're right, if you get there right against the cutoff, then it is very hard to do a warm up in the actual corral. Karen asks, is there a way to easily refill my handheld at water stations? So yeah, that's a really great question, Karen. And again, that just in my mind reiterates and reemphasizes what I said about going to some of the later tables. Is I would go to the second or third table, find a volunteer. I would stop by that volunteer, take the cup from him or her, tell them that you're going to be filling up your water bottle or water bottles, and take as many cups from that person as necessary to pour into your cup. You should be able to do that at some of the later tables, but if you tried to do that at the first table or so at the aid stations, it's just got to be so crowded that you're going to feel like you're almost like getting forced out, if that makes sense, just because of the number of bodies. But for those of you who are bringing and running with your own hydration, you want to take as much time as necessary. So if that means stopping in the aid station, once it, stopping, making sure that you're clear of everybody and nobody's going to run into the back of you, but having an idea of where the aid station is as you look up and you're running, it's to your make a decision. Are you going to go to the right or are you going to go to the left? Because the aid stations, the water stations are on each side of the street. So if I'm going right, I'm going right. I'm going to go to the third table. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to find a volunteer. I'm going to have him or her hand me cups and tell them I'm filling up my my handheld, and I'm going to look where I'm going as I exit the water station and safely join the flow of runners. Hopefully that helps. Cool. Yeah, you're welcome, Karen. So this next slide is what I like to call the so what, now what, move forward mentality. And what I mean by that is going back into what I talked about as you experience in training, no doubt, as you will experience on race day, there will be peaks and there will be valleys. Let's just say you have a hard time from mile 13 to 14 because you realize that, oh my gosh, I ran so far, but I'm only halfway and I'm exhausted. So from mile 13 to 14 was a really tough mental mile for you. My recommendation is adopt that so what, now what mentality. Don't make mile 14 to 15 bad. Don't allow the previous mile to bleed into that present mile. Stay present in the mile that you're in. Except that, you know what? Yeah, that last mile sucked. I've never ran a slower mile. I'm starting to freak out because I have so far to go. I've never done this before, or I haven't done this in a long time, and I'm scared, I'm nervous, all the above. That is all completely normal. So just realize that there are going to be people out on the course with all kinds of crazy insecurities, myself included. It doesn't matter how many marathons or races that you've ran. There's going to be doubt that creeps in. But adopting that so what, now what. So I encourage you, that could be your mantra. When something negative creeps into your mind, just automatically, so what, now what? So what, now what? How am I going to navigate this mile? Okay, so that's what I mean by when I say adopt a so what, now what mentality. And hopefully that makes sense. So some race day strategy, which I think, everything I put on here, and I'm going to tackle the tangents where the image is right there. I'm going to tackle that last. But a few things that I would recommend is when you have the opportunity to pass, when it makes sense to pass, when you have the space and it's clear that the person that you're coming up behind is running at a slower pace than you, and you are undoubtedly going to pass that runner, pass with authority. And what I mean by that is that as you come shoulder to shoulder with that runner, surge past that other runner. I find that not only is that like a physically, like you've physically passed that person, passing with authority, where you just tick up your speed just a little bit as you pass that person, gives you just something extra mentally. And you're going to need to find even the smallest wins, even the smallest victories as you're out there, especially in those later miles. Even if you've thrown your race goal plans out the window because you were so far behind, and it's like you're dragging your leg because your right knee started bothering you and it's never bothered you, but you know what, as luck would have it, it started bothering you on race day. Whatever little small mental physical victories you can achieve and earn out there on the course, take them. So that's what I mean by passing with authority. Even if it's just a tick faster, your pace is just a tick faster for that fleeting moment that you pass that person, pass with authority. And then also pass wide. Give yourselves the space, especially if you're going to pass in the early miles, which if you have the opportunity to pass and it makes sense, then take it. But make sure that you have the space to do it, because you will see people weaving in and out, and they misjudge the amount of space that they have, and they're not necessarily watching out for other people, and they're kind of lost in their own race, which, that happens. Just make sure that you give yourself enough space as you do pass. I like to also recommend to my athletes surge on the corners. Runners, for whatever reason, and especially in a marathon, tend to slow down as they round or run a corner. So like the twists and turns throughout the race, which there are plenty of those in the Chicago Marathon. I find that, like, my recommendation is don't be like everybody else. And, again, even if it is just a tick faster than the pace that you were just running, just like I said, passing with authority, surge into that corner and then fall back into your regular pace as you get back on the straightaway. But just surging into the corner while everybody else is just kind of jogging or taking a little bit slow in the corner, you undoubtedly will pass a person here or there, and they may end up passing you again at some point. But surging on the corner, I find, is a huge mental perk that can be achieved throughout the race. And then this last one here, surge at the top and bottom of each hill. Now, the Chicago Marathon, many of you may have signed up for the Chicago Marathon because it's a flat course, and it is a very flat course. And I'm going to use the word hill very lightly. Other than, like, for those of you who've done the Chicago Marathon on Roosevelt, basically at about mile 26, where there's an incline there, and it certainly feels like a large steep hill, but there are inclines. There are inclines throughout the race, and you will slow, right? I mean, you're going to slow down as you go up a hill. But what I mean by surging at the top and the bottom of the hill is that as you go up the hill, you want to maintain effort. Effort should remain the same, even though you know that your pace is going to slow down a little bit just because you're running up an incline. But as you start to crest that hill and come out, crest that incline, as you come up to the top of it, that's when you want to surge. Again, just a tick faster, because that's when everybody else is going to be slowing down and or walking, going from maybe a slow jog to a walk. And you may be forced to walk, and that's okay. And if that's what your experience is on race day, that's fine too. There's certainly no judgments here from me or from anybody else. But if you can just surge right when you get to the top of the hill, that's going to just give you that extra confidence boost. Like, hey, I just got up that incline and I just saw 4 people walking, but I didn't. Or maybe I was forced to walk, but when I got to the top of it, I walked a little bit faster. Just like that little tiny mental physical victory right there, that fleeting moment is key. So hopefully that makes sense. And then going up to the top, and you'll see this little picture here to the right. I'm always surprised by how many runners don't run the tangents on the course, which is the shortest distance through the race route. In any race, really, running the tangents can shave several seconds from your time. Really, the key here is to look up and be aware of what's ahead. So, again, that's where jumping on the Chicago Marathon website or checking out the email that was sent to you that has the link to the course, or watching, or even better yet, watching the course video, knowing where the turns are going to be and anticipating those so that you can run the tangents. So the key is, again, to look up and be aware of what's ahead on curving roads or curving parts of the course. You don't want to snake your way along the center line, which it would be the diagram on the left where it says no, where you just kind of it's like you're floating down the river and you're just kind of going with the flow of things. That's not what you want to do. If you did that throughout the course, you would actually end up running more than 26.2 miles. And I don't think anybody listening now or at a later time is going to want to do that. I know I certainly don't. So instead, you want to run a straight line from inside corner to inside corner, using the entire route to run the shortest distance possible. with just a little bit of awareness of the course will allow you to truly run the shortest distance, which, again, the tangent. So the picture on the right where it says, yes, that green line, that is how the course is measured. And you will actually see, and I encourage you to look down when it's safe, you will see a blue line painted on the street for all 26.2 miles. And that is how the course is measured. And it's measured at the tangents. So run the tangents and you will run the 26.2 miles. But if you run kind of with the flow, the curves, you will end up running something closer to 27, 28, 29 miles, which I don't think anybody here wants to do an ultra marathon on October 13th. So post-race, truly the time to celebrate. And the number one tip that I put up here, which I am a firm believer in, is upon crossing the finish line, have one of the volunteers place your finisher's medal around your neck. You've certainly earned the honor. Now, these volunteers that hand out the medals are, in my opinion, the best of the best. And they are properly trained. They are smiling. They're very congratulatory, and they will put the medal around your neck. I just feel like, just grabbing it from them and putting it on themselves, just, it doesn't give you your full due for what you just accomplished. So I would stop, bend down, and they'll get the drift. They'll put the medal around your neck. I don't know, just something kind of, I guess, cheesy, but something that I think is pretty important. Immediately after finishing, the overwhelming urge is going to be to sit down and stop moving. This is the worst possible thing that you can do. And there's going to be also volunteers looking out for people doing this, and they're going to continue to shuttle you through the finisher chute because, as you can imagine, it is pandemonium in there, and there's a lot of people finishing at any given moment. So they're going to keep you moving, which is a good thing. Although at the time, in that moment, it might seem like the worst possible idea. Having that plan in place. So again, if you have people that are going to be there on race weekend with you, along the course, figuring out where they're going to see you, where they're going to watch you at, and then also if you're going to meet up with them post-race, figuring out where you're going to do that. About 5 years ago, the Bank of America Chicago Marathon stopped allowing people really into or near the finish line to watch their runners finish for security reasons. And so that is why there is, I believe, what's called the 27th mile after party or 27th mile post-race party, which is always a great place because there is a runner reunite area there where they have big signs with the alphabet. So that would be a good spot to have your loved ones or loved one find you. I would recommend, if you can, trying to eat a full meal within 2 hours of finishing the race. I would also steer clear, again, this is up to you, but I would steer clear, and I believe Brittany on our nutrition webinar from a few weeks back also recommended this from drinking alcohol right away. I believe you will get a Goose Island beer ticket that they will serve you in the actual finisher chute. You know what? If you want to, you've earned it, but it certainly isn't the greatest of ideas. But you know what? Who am I to say not to enjoy yourself afterwards? But do try to eat that full meal within 2 hours of finishing the race. I put transportation to where you're staying. Again, if you are staying in a hotel in the city, knowing how you're going to get from the finishers area or the 27th mile party area to where you're staying is key. So figuring that out yourself or with your contingent of people that are going to be with you, this weekend, if you don't have it figured out, would be a great time to do that. I strongly encourage, let's just say like that evening, a 15 to 20 minute ice bath, or it can be something as simple as sitting in a bathtub with just cold water. Does not need to be filled with ice, just to kind of start helping the recovery process and healing some of the damage that is even occurring at the cellular level. Again, it goes without saying to keep moving and doing some light stretching. Uh, the overwhelming feeling once again is going to be to lay down or lie down in the middle of the street and fall asleep. We are not going to be doing that. We need to keep moving. The more you move over time, the better you will feel. Trust me on that one. If you have or you plan on scheduling a massage the week after the race, I would encourage you to wait until Tuesday or Wednesday of that following week, just to account for any sort of delayed onset muscle soreness. I always find that it's not Monday, the day after. It's typically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that I am at my most sore. So I think waiting to have a massage until then is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And then, of course, take an inventory of what went well, not only on race day, but in training. If you keep a journal, write down in your journal or your running diary, running log of, your experience and how you felt, what parts of the race were especially difficult, what parts of the race you found not so difficult, those peaks and valleys. And so, but certainly now is the time to take stock of, how training has gone and how you plan on navigating race week. But then you're going to want to do that post race as well. And of course, we all need a little inspiration, and you can all read this slide, but I'm going to jump down to the very last quote. And I think it's really, really quite appropriate for this is, the quote is, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we tend to fall to the level of our training." I know everyone that's listening to this has worked really, really hard this summer. And, no one's perfect. I don't know, myself included, an athlete that has hit 100% of their workouts, and that's okay. My plans and most plans are built with a little bit of variance included there, knowing that we're human beings with regular lives and life is going to get in the way. But I feel confident in saying that those who are listening, who are on this, have done the bulk of the training. So you should feel confident, even if this is your first one and you're kind of having a freak out moment right now listening to this, or you're going to freak out as you get closer to race day. Just have confidence in the miles that you've ran, and really knowing that the training is really the hard part. The race itself is a celebration, and many of you have been doing and putting your miles in, and those miles have been a solo endeavor, and that's hard. You will draw inspiration from anywhere and everywhere on race days you run with 40,000 plus like-minded folks. So, but we all had expectations going into this when we signed up, but just trust in that you put in the training and your race day performance will fall in line with that. So as we finish up tonight's webinar, I just put on there some ways to stay connected. Race week is a time for excitement. It's a time to take care of any last minute pending items. And it's also a time to connect with me if you have any questions or concerns that don't get addressed on this webinar. So you've got my email. If you've emailed with me before, you've got my phone number. I will be available via email, social media, call, text, whatever this next week. So I encourage you to reach out, even if it's a simple question or what you perceive as simple. I'm happy. I'm thrilled to answer any questions that you might have. So please reach out if you have a question and maybe you don't think of it tonight, or you don't want to necessarily ask the question on this platform. Definitely connect with me offline, and we'll make sure that we get that addressed. But with that said, that concludes the presentation portion of the webinar tonight. I'm going to leave it open for a few minutes here for some Q&A. So if you have a question, comment, or concern, go ahead and type that into the chat box, please. So Karen asked, are there photographers along the course? Any way of picking them out of the crowd? Yes, yes, there are a lot of photographers. I believe the company that the Chicago Marathon contracts with is called Marathon Photo, and the photographers are very easy to pick out. They tend to be wearing what looks like a safety vest, I guess, like a fluorescent safety vest, and I don't know, it might even and they usually, it might even say like photographer or marathon photo. So there are definitely points along the course where there are photographers. And so when you, and probably as early as the evening of the 13th, as get your post-race dinner in and you're settling down and you're basking all your glory, you will be able to see, and you'll start getting emails that some of your photos are being uploaded. And you will have a chance to also purchase those from Marathon Photo. Those are available. You will also be able to, when you go onto the Chicago Marathon website and you look up your race results, you'll be able to click on your name. And then also when you click on your name, you'll also be able to view your photographers. Or excuse me, your photos, not your photographers, but your photos. So hopefully that helps, Karen. Next question. So Sarah asks, is just under 200 miles, hold on here, just under 200 miles on your shoes too much in your opinion? Have a pair with less, but they do not feel as good. So in that case, Sarah, and that's a really great question. You know what, like, so when I used to work at a run specialty store, we always told people like, hey, like, every 450 to 500 miles, you want to change out your shoes. Uh, I would say if the shoes with 200 miles feel good, then go with them. Chances are they're going to perform really well for you on race day. I would certainly feel more confident running in the shoes with 190 miles, knowing that they feel really good, versus a pair that maybe have 100 miles on them, but they're just not as comfortable. So go with the shoes that have, let's just say, the 190 miles, knowing that no matter what pair of shoes you wear, your feet are going to kill you at some point during the race. So I would opt for the shoes that feel better from the start, and hopefully that helps. Let's see here. Melissa asks, on the app, some spots where there will be photographers are actually marked on the map. Oh, you know what, Melissa, that's a great point. So I think it was Karen who asked that. Yeah, so and I don't think I mentioned it. Yeah, I think I mentioned it as far as like spectators, but I encourage all of you, all participants, to download the Chicago Marathon app, because information like that about the course and just about the race itself, and again, like Melissa points out, the spots where the photographers are at points marked on the map. So download the app to check all that out. Thanks, Melissa. That's a great point, though. Mark points out and asks, I hear the buildings block your GPS. Just how bad is the GPS coverage on the course? Yeah, that is true, Mark. I wish it wasn't, but most everybody I've spoken to, and my personal experience has been that within the first 2 miles, like when you're running under whacker and just with the buildings, that the GPS does go out. So I don't know. I don't know in all the Chicago marathons that I have done where when I've crossed the finish line, my watch has actually said 26.2 miles. It's been something like in excess of 27 miles. Not that I've actually ran 27 miles, but yes, GPS can be a little wacky. The only consistent part that or the consistent data points that I can hang my hat on, or have been able to hang my hat on, are one, the stopwatch feature of my my watch, so the time, and typically the pace. And so distance tends to get a little screwy with just the buildings and running under the bridges and stuff. So that's a good point. Hopefully that helps. Jessica asks, do you have any suggestions for rehabbing your toes the week of? Mine are starting to blister, callus, etc., to the point to where it's starting to bug me. Yeah, that's pretty common. That's pretty common, right? I mean, for some of us, or really all of us who've been training and dedicated to the training, we got hundreds and hundreds of miles on our feet. And so a couple things I would just, quick inventory is, are you comfortable with the shoes that you have going into race week? If that's a yes, check that off the list. Are you comfortable with the socks that you have and that you've been running in heading into race week? If that's a check that off too. I would also this week, it would be advisable to probably every night, I would soak your feet in Epsom salt, so like hot water with Epsom salt mixed in. I just find that and I would do that at night, right? Because that's magnesium, so that's going to help kind of bring you down from the day. It's going to help jumpstart the sleep process, but doing that about an hour before bed. But that's also going to just really give your feet some much needed relaxation and relief from the miles, and will start to help heal those blisters. So Epsom salt baths have worked wonders for me. So I can't recommend that enough. So Epsom salts, and if you do that at night, and if you're worried too about just like your quality of sleep next week because it's just you're going to be jacked up, I would also even consider putting like a drop of like lavender oil in that water, and sitting on a little bench or a chair and just kind of hunched over with your feet in there and just breathing in the lavender, I think is really, really, really relaxing, great for the nervous system, and great for your feet as well. I would also consider, again, if you haven't been doing this up to this point, then you can either try it or not. But I'm a big fan of lacing my toes with like Body Glide, just to prevent any sort of like friction, especially if you have a blister started. But also, again, making sure that your shoes and socks are in order as well. But try those things: the Epsom salt baths, and then the Body Glide or something like Aquaphor in between your toes and on the blisters to help with the friction as well. Hopefully that helps, Jessica. These are really great questions, and I encourage it if you're still on to ask. Oh, you're welcome. So as I close out, what I want to say is I just want to say, and if you have, and even with me saying this, if you have a question, type it in. We'll get it addressed here. But I just want to say that one, thanks for letting me be a part of your journey up until this point. It's really an honor to be able to share my experiences over the better part of a decade running, and over 10 Chicago marathons that I've personally done, being able to share this with you. I get great joy out of it, but I also don't take the responsibility lightly. So thank you. You all are just an inspiration to me and to so many others. And it's really easy to get caught up in the training. It's easy to get caught up in just what sometimes can feel like this selfish endeavor where we're running hours and hours on end, and maybe we have family at home that are waiting for us to get back, and it can seem like, oh my gosh, like why am I doing this? And I'm sure that maybe you've questioned yourself at some point or some points throughout training, but just don't forget that you are an inspiration to me, and chances are you're an inspiration to those who are closest to you, and many of you have such great reasons why you decided to take on this challenge. And so you belong on that start line. Everybody on that start line has a story, yourselves included. And so I just cannot wait to hear, and I encourage you to please connect with me post race. If you have some great pictures that were taken of you on the course, post those, and post those to the Kopf Running Facebook page, and connect with me afterwards, and let me know how your experience was, because I really want to hear from you. Send me photos in all your glory. Please, I encourage you to do that, because I eat that stuff up, and I love that. And so Lastly, and I'll reiterate, please connect with me next week if you have anything or have any needs. I'm here for you. And with that said, we're going to go ahead and close tonight's webinar, but please connect with me afterwards if you have any questions. And for those of you who are going to be listening to this after the live call, after the live webinar, and you have questions that maybe weren't answered tonight, reach out. So with that said, best of luck as you head into race week. I'm so excited for all of you, and I'm inspired by all of you. And I look forward to hearing about your marathon success. So have a great night, have a healthy week, and we'll be in touch soon. All right, guys, take care.